This is episode 199 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Ray Glymph. Ray is a real estate investor and mentor who started with nothing and has transformed his passion for real estate and real estate investing into over 100 doors and a mentorship program to help others do the same. Ray, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Congratulations on 199.
I know we're getting there. It's crazy. But if you think back on your journey, when was the first time that you thought about real estate as something that could help you in life?
I looked at it always as something just to live in and just a place to live in. And I think I'm one of those people that became what we call accidental investors.
Yeah.
I actually purchased one of my first homes, and I was at the bar with a buddy of mine, and he was like, "Hey, Ray, man," he was a law school student. And he said, "Hey, I need a place to move to. My house is like getting condemned. I need a place to move to." I was like, "How much you paying?" And at the time, it was like half my mortgage.
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, I got a basement. You can stay." And he was like, "Really?"
Yeah.
Before you know it, I was like, "Man, this guy just moved into a basement space that I'm not using, and all of a sudden, half my mortgage is paid." So the light bulb kind of clicked in. That was my first.
That's actually a really common thread for people going back 10, 20, 30 years. They were doing real estate before terminology called things house hacking or all of these things. They were just doing smart things to make money. But then once you saw that basement, did you start to think, wait, I could do this more times on more properties?
Yeah. And even from the basement, once he actually moved out, this thing, I heard about it a while ago, and it became known as Airbnb. I actually Airbnb the basement. And it actually ended up paying the full mortgage. So at that point, I said, wow, like I'm living, mortgage free. That extra capital I could use to further invest and scale this thing. I like how this is going. And that was my first taste of real estate.
So after that first property, how did you start figuring out how you were going to get more properties? Because it sounds great, but then there's still the money that you need to get them, and then the deals to find, and kind of knowing about, more about real estate along the way.
So I guess it goes back. It sounds like I have a drinking problem, but I don't from to because I
didn't go to another bar.
Great conversation, networking. That's skills of investor networking. I was in a bar with about 7 or 8 of my friends, closest friends at the time. They were all different fields. They were all making way more money than me, attorneys and entrepreneurs of every sort. And they started throwing out some terms that we can, renovate this and refinance this. And we could each put in $5,000 each. And at that point, it's 40 grand, 50 grand, and we could purchase the property and get all our money back out of it and then have permanent income. And I was like, "You fellas, I don't know what you're talking about, but I want it." And at that point, I started doing a little bit more research. I was 100% committed. I was working or I had owned businesses, but they were really not businesses. They were almost jobs for me, and I want to say I owned jobs at that point, and I wanted to kind of get away from those, and real estate seemed like a great way to get out of it. So I started doing some research, and when it came time to, get the guys together again and all, make our commitment and invest, everybody backed out.
Oh, wow.
Everybody had their own reasons, but everybody backed out. Nobody went in. But at that point, I was already committed, and there was no stopping me.
Yeah. Did you find other people, or did you just do the next step yourself?
No. So the first one I found, I did a deal, and I'll share the numbers with you guys because it's kind of crazy to look back at what, real estate and how much is.
What area were you in at the time? And maybe you're still there.
Yeah. So I invested. My first house that I purchased was in West Virginia, but my second one was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. Yeah, bro. That second one was in Pittsburgh. I actually paid $25,000 for it. It was a wholesale deal. I found it on Craigslist of all places.
It does still exist.
These deals, and you can still find some kind of deals out there, but I would be more careful in today's market.
Yeah.
But it was from a wholesale. I didn't know what a wholesaler was at the time. I thought this guy was going to run off with my money. Sure enough, I ended up getting a property. Paid $25,000. It was in a terrible neighborhood. Didn't know any better. It was D-class property, had but it was a learning experience. And I think that was the most powerful point of real estate, is a continual learning experience.
Well, I think that's the best way to look at it too. Like, okay, maybe now you wouldn't go and buy D-class unless you knew what you were doing for D-class, because I think it takes a certain type of investor to do it. But that's part of what, all of us are hoping to prevent other people from, because D-class looks sweet on cash flow.
Sure.
It looks like amazing. You're like, I'm getting a 2.8% rule on this. This is unbelievable. But of course, it comes with CapEx and neighborhood issues and tenancy issues. So how did you figure out what to do with that property and how to move forward? Because a lot of people would say, I messed up, it's 25 grand, I'm just going to leave it. And that becomes a problem with the neighborhood in general.
So I was already pot committed, ladies and gentlemen. It was turning me down. It was a learning experience for me too, as far as the construction side, because I did need some rehab.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing a rehab on myself. I think I overdeveloped it. I know I overdeveloped it. I put, materials in there that you wouldn't want to put, especially for rent.
Yeah.
I was living there though.
Mm.
So that was one of my mistakes that I made in the beginning of my journey.
Yeah.
But after all was said and done, I still remember the tenant, they paid, I think it was $1,000. So I had that 2% rule. Didn't even know what the rule was, but
yeah.
I'm like, man, this is cash flow. This is amazing. I don't have to cook anything. Don't have to sling any drinks or make, I'm making money on the side. And at that point, I thought, man, I made it, I again said, okay, how can I replicate this? Like, can I do this again? So lo and behold, I found another property, $25,000. Put another 25, 30 into it. It was cash flow, another $1,000. So I'm making $2,000 a month at that time. Great money. Ran into a headache tenant. They kind of destroyed the place. And that was the first like lesson,
How long did it take you? I mean, I feel like I'm still learning. I'm like well more than 30 years into the game, but in the beginning, how hard was it to start to understand those things like repair costs and like your ARV when you don't have as much access back then and trying to figure out in a new neighborhood too?
So everything was, okay, I'll pay whatever because it made sense.
Yeah.
And I can afford it. That was my mentality at the time until I would say COVID. And COVID is when you really started paying attention, like, yeah, this price isn't what it was. Well, I'm paying $5,000 for a roof. I'm not paying $15,000 for a roof.
Yeah.
We saw it happen just like, and that was like really the calling point. Before that, I had started to pay attention. Prices had started to creep up, but it was controllable. Like everything was measurable. But then during COVID, it really hit them like, man, these costs have like skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And that's when it became, all right, now you have to operate as an entrepreneur and you have to tame the beast. I have a maintenance. I have a budget. And don't be afraid. I think it's a great point for listeners too. Don't be afraid to tell contractors if they come back with a price of, hey, $7,000, hey, my budget on this thing is $5,000.
Yeah.
And you work with me upon that. Right. I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
Be pleasantly surprised. So as much as they need you just as much too, the contractors need you too. Of course.
Yeah.
Working within that realm of, hey, this is what my budget is. These are what my numbers, and it is a numbers-based game again. These are my numbers. I need to stick to this. Hey, if you can't work beyond that, that's fine. I understand it. We'll get back to it. Also, prioritizing what needs to be done, what can be done.
Yeah.
And I want to give you guys an example. I got a roof, has 5 years of life on it. I had a roofer go over. He was supposed to, look at the gutters. Hey, man, you need a new roof here. No, I need a new roof. I'm not going to pay for it right now.
The funny thing, I think for people who don't, stay in the same area, they overthink the word gentrification. Like what you're talking about is gentrification, but I doubt that the neighborhood has changed that much. Like it's not always people getting pushed out of the neighborhood. That it does happen. That definitely does happen. But when a neighborhood goes from D+ slowly to C, most of the people are staying there. Some may not be able to go up, but it's not going from D to B, so it becomes unaffordable. It's slowly helping everybody raise the value for the people who own things there, so they're getting more equity as you help renovate the properties there.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think COVID kind of accelerated a lot of that too, right? Because we saw raises in taxes, insurance, utility costs, maintenance costs. All those costs went up. So you have what we call our legacy landlords. You have the landlords who they were afraid to raise rent, and they weren't going to do anything, and they weren't going to repair anything. And they're kind of just fading out of existence and going into retirement and just letting those great assets that they kind of let depreciate and fall. They're letting those go. And new investors are coming in with the new lifeblood and saying, hey, look, let's go. Let's fix these properties. Let's add some value. And that's where we see the biggest growth, I think.